we arrive out of many singular rooms. We come to be assured that brothers and sisters surround us to restore their images on our eyes. This, of course, from Ken Patton. We arrive out of many singular rooms. So I was at a meeting this week in Boston for the board of a foundation that is run by Congregationalist ministers, both Unitarian and Orthodox. And after the meeting was over, one of my colleagues, a very senior colleague, in fact, from a larger congregation, made a comment to the effect that he always found that church work slows down a great deal after Easter. And that comment stuck with me. Mostly because that's not my experience at all. In fact, I was late to this meeting where these words were uttered because I had already had 2 meetings that morning, and I rushed out of that meeting because I had 2 more in the afternoon and the evening. In fact, while measures like attendance, perhaps obviously, decline as we get closer to the summer, the workload doesn't really change in small churches like ours. What usually does happen when there's no holiday to look forward to is that we do the same work with fewer people. And depending on the year, there is even more work to do after the holidays are done. You see, the church has seasons and cycles. I think we know that. And while Easter and Christmas feel far away, all that means is that during this time, we church leaders have the opportunity to address other things. Frequently things that have been put off because of the holidays until this moment. In churches like ours, this is a time to get things ready for the future, for networking, for reaching out to local, denominational, and interfaith organizations. It is a time of study and preparation for next year. It is a time to focus on the business of the church as we take advantage of this seeming lull to give some of the other work the attention it deserves. Now, this other work of the church, this non-liturgical, often mundane-seeming labor is, of course, also holy. Chili cook-off is holy. But sometimes it doesn't seem that way. When we get caught in the weeds of our planning for programs and meetings, or the many other small tasks that make our gathering together worthwhile, it can be easy to forget that we are a spiritual institution. At the retreat yesterday, we threw around the word spiritual a lot. But this time of year, we can get so wrapped up in the details of running a small nonprofit that we forget that this small nonprofit is, in fact, also a church, built on those relationships that Patton celebrates in our responsive reading today. In many ways, this confusion between a regular nonprofit and a church is understandable, right? After all, there are parallels between what many of us do in the rest of our lives and what we do here for this congregation and for other boards and foundations that also do good works. And when we interact with people who don't go to other churches, of course, we find that their connection to us, to this Eliot Church, is primarily secular. Many of the things that we do, when seen in a certain, and I would say somewhat limited light, many of the things we do don't appear to be religious at all. To casual observers, we look just like those other organizations that we volunteer for. To these folks, the Eliot Church can appear to be a concert hall or a volunteer service agency or an advocacy or justice group, or a child enrichment program, a rental facility, or a philosophical institute, among other things. When I first came here, people would actually wander in during worship. They'd see the door open, and they'd wander in, and I'd see them coming, because they thought it was a museum or a historical society. And they would look around, and some of you deacons probably know, eventually someone would go up to them and be like, I remember Mary doing this once actually, being like, would you like an order of service? You know, it's like a little confusing. And yesterday, we talked a little bit about some of our neighbors who think that the church is closed. And in a sense, there is some truth to all of these characterizations, except the closed one. But to us, in our hearts, we are different. We are not like those other groups, because we are a house of worship. We are a church, a holy church, in fact, housing a congregation gathered from our many separate rooms, gathered from our own lives with our own concerns, in order to learn together and support each other in our faith-filled walk through this world. In our reading today from Matthew, we heard Jesus say, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered. It's one of the better known lines in the Bible. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered. And if we stop right there, that gathering could be almost anything. It could be a party. It could be a protest. It could be a meeting. It could be a chance encounter at a coffee shop. But then he goes on to say, in my name. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. And then we get the sense of the kind of gathering he had in mind. And then he says, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am with them. And in that moment, that gathered group receives a promise of the presence of a divine spirit, whatever that may be in our systematic theology, a divine spirit in their or our work. And that's not explicitly promised when we gather with other groups in other ways. This promise is what William Sloane Coffin is referring to when he claims that the church is conserving, at its best, the most uprooting, the most revolutionary force in human history. Which is to say, even when we seem to be doing secular work, there is always something else going on. There is something sacred going on, in fact. We are not, at most budget meetings, for example, gathered for the purpose of being moved in the Spirit. We are there to crunch numbers, to get the job done. What changes that meeting into something holy in and of itself is our intent and our context as church, as a holy church. When we gather in the name of what is holy, whatever that might be, and however we might experience it, we have the opportunity to feel its presence. When we gather as the church, here in this sanctuary, or over at the hall, or at the retreat center, or out on the street, we are making the choice to bring that Spirit with us into what we do. We have made the choice to be together, people, on this journey of our souls, reclaiming the remembered faces in Patton's words. And our reasons for that choice were, and still are, a little bit different for each of us. But that's okay. Some made the choice for themselves. Others made the choice for their kids. Others were the kids, and their parents made the choice. Maybe we wanted to make friends when we came here, or sought intellectual stimulation, or in fact felt that spiritual call or interest. Maybe it was a combination of all these things. But whatever our original and current motivations, that choice we make comes with a vision. Vision was another word we threw around at the retreat a lot. It comes with a vision. We are, after all, seeking ways to live into the story we tell. One that began perhaps with those ancient prophets, but one that continues to this day. It is the vision we use to order our actions. It is a vision that requires our presence to itself be present. It is a vision that requires our presence to itself be present. In that reading from Hebrews today, there's an appeal that is, on a basic level, an appeal for church attendance. But on a broader level, it's an appeal for the work of the church, work that is not limited to Sunday mornings. Let us consider, it says, how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see that day approaching. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. We do not march or meet or preach or sing because we are told by some distant force, ecclesial or spiritual, but instead because the transcendent is present to us and to others in that moment. It's because the transcendent is present in that moment. When we do these things with worshipful hearts, we are brought closer to the divine and to our true selves. These are not moments of holy obligation, but of holy participation, holy celebration. Even when we are planning for parish committee, or fixing the side door, or cleaning, or landscaping, this congregation, this church family, a family by choice, has a sacred task that does not exist in other voluntary associations. The transcendent may break out there as well from time to time, but that's always a surprise when it does, and we hear about it. In a congregation, regardless of their faith tradition, in a congregation, it should be expected as part of living in a blessed community. Now, what we're saying here, perhaps obviously, is that what we do with our institution is important. And that all those potential misperceptions about our primary task and function are, in fact, sacred moments because of the intent we put into them. You see, this church, the one that refuses to be domesticated, that is steeped in the will toward the divine, does make requirements of us personally. But those requirements steer us toward a greater vision of ourselves. And it makes requirements of our society based on this greater vision of the world. This is the holy church that our hymn asks about and then answers, where race and class unite as equal persons in the search for beauty, truth, and right. This is our holy writ, as the song says, wherever a human heart a sacred torch of truth has lit by inspiration taught. This is how we ultimately connect to that Holy One, where people rise in every land to break the captive's bond. The challenge, our challenge, is to see that church, that writ, that holy spark of divinity in everything we do. So let us take a moment now in silence to consider what keeps us looking forward and what blocks our vision.